body and in mind. Settle yourselves down on this fine Saturday evening. For now, it is time for Bridgette and Kelsey.
Woo woo! Hey, it's Bridgette and Kelsey, and it is, of course, would be Saturday night, right? So we're on the third installation, and I want to start off right by talking about all the different ways that you, yes, you, and me, and everyone can donate to Revolution Radio. Yep, we need your help more than ever. More than ever, if you're watching all the craziness going on, and we're going to need lots of help.
Wow.
So we have 4 different platforms in which you can actually donate. If you go to the main website, freedomslips.com, there's a donation button. You can give us a credit card payment. We also have a nice red Patreon button right on the page. You can become a Patreon member and give us a little moolah once a month. We also have Zazzle.com. You can pick up T-shirts or cups or, any kind of Revolution Radio host souvenirs.
Swag.
And then you could always go to the bottom of the page of the website and you will see information on how to send a check or a money order and an address in which you can go ahead and do that. So, and so wanted to make sure we got that out. And because we've been bad the last couple of shows, because I wasn't sure exactly what were all the mediums in which, there could be some donation going on. The other thing, too, is that if you go to freedomslips.com and you go to Studio B, scroll down, you're going to find a thumbnail for our show at the 8 p.m. Eastern slot, Studio B. You can click on that thumbnail. We got a back page. So it has all of the up-to-date information about Kelsey and I and our work that we're doing and all of that. And so if you want to contact us for any reason, please do so. But, no hate mail. Eject. I eject hate mail. All right. Well, what have you been doing this week? Kelsey's been doing a little bit of celebrating.
Celebrate. I'm celebrating to our intro music. It's been a good time. Yeah, I don't know. It's been a strange week. It's a week of freedom, and solid boundaries, I suppose. On top of all the election stuff. It's interesting because I've never been married. I'm in my early 30s and I've never been married. I put all my time and my focus on education and business, but I've got a kid. And so for like the last 3 years or so, we've been going through the process of custody, and we've got paperwork signed, and it feels like a divorce. It's like, it feel like I'm still trying to like take in all the information, and like with that, like, and having to get rid of my car and all these other things, like I'm just clearing out so much space and so much energy to make room for bigger things and better things in my life.
I hear Axe in the background going, hi-ya. I'm like, ooh, he's back there cutting through your red tape for you.
There he goes. He's my co-host today, my miniature co-host in practice,
So, I mean, but it has been good, right? I mean, being able to kind of have boundaries now, not putting you on the spot, so don't say anything you don't want to, but it feels good to actually have some boundaries because you were having some really awful, really awful stuff happening to you, and as a result of your relationship. And so now it's now it's being handled, where people are monitoring it, and you got the agreement that you wanted, the mediation. So, I mean, on some level, it's kind of like it would be, it would be a good divorce, right?
Well, there's accountability in place, but accountability on both sides. And I think when it comes to contracts, or you'd mentioned ceremony and talking about ceremonies today. So maybe this is like a good segue into it, because things like a marriage, that's a ceremony. It's some sort of stepping stone, and it's an initiation that you go through, right? That defines social boundaries and it defines expectations. And when you're deviating from like standard or traditional norms, or like when you're an artist or you fall into the realms of not fitting into the typical expectations, for your age and your gender, those roles are, I think, really difficult to define. There's nothing that really locks into stone anything of what that is. So having like the paperwork there, having signatures in place, like it binds something and makes something solid, and it brings something into reality. Otherwise, if you have something existing in your head and somebody's got something existing in your head, and you have together this projected fantasy, there's not necessarily something solidifying that in between. So you have two people who are living two different lives, or having different expectations with how they should show up in the world. So, yeah, I think when it comes to rituals, or when it comes to, ritual is a funny word. We've talked about this before, I think, in previous shows. Having the ceremony and the marker and the connection to spirit and to something beyond, I think, helps to propel us into different levels of understanding or consciousness and that sort of thing. So it's been an interesting week. That's for sure. Yeah.
I think a lot about, because, I kind of have to explain this to people because I don't think people really understand, but, I walk a native spirituality path. That's what I'm about. It's what all my teachers and my blood, this is what I've done. And I've spent a lifetime, doing shamanism, traditional, shamanism work, and a lot of this other stuff. And, ceremony kind of combines us to the spirit world in a good way. And it helps us to set the intention and also have assistance to navigate, however the energy and the path is going to navigate, whether we get into a relationship, or we have a child or an animal, or we have a piece of land, or we have a house. All these things have living energies and living beings in them. And I think, one of the, most important things, that I've learned is that I won't even travel to like the nearest city, like say I just have to drive down to Carson City, which is like 30 minutes. I won't even go down there until I've given a tobacco offering, and I've actually prayed to the beings down there, because even though I go there and it's part of, Reno, going back and forth, I don't live there. So I'm, asking permission, but I'm also like, ringy dingy, here's a phone call, and, asking the good spirits, asking the ancestor, asking the grandmothers and grandfathers, asking the beings there, the good ones, to, that I'm coming, and then, thanking them for looking after me, helping me with my journey, right? So, in the simplest form, like we call it a prayer, but it is kind of a really fast ceremony. I have one of my native friends who, she's got her, tobacco in hand, and when she's getting to the border, she also throws out another tobacco as she's like crossing the border into, say, like another state. So she'll pray, and create a ceremony to contact the beings where she's going to go. And then, she'll also, has her tobacco ready to throw out the window when she actually crosses that line to go there. But, I think it's like ceremony also takes into consideration, but there's so many different levels and fields and beings and so many things going on with us, and being able to directly ask the good spirits to help us instead of, and I know I've so many times if I'm in a hurry and I end up crossing those borders, or I'm going into another city and I totally forgot just to stop myself. I mean, also ceremony to me is like living in the present moment. It's about just stopping and being really conscious of, like everything that I'm doing. And things escalate. I'll go into a different place and then all of a sudden I get in a car accident. All of a sudden this happens and, all hell starts to break loose. And I've learned that asking for help, asking permission, thanking, offering, a lot of these things really sets the stage for every step that I take in my life and the directions that I'm going to go and whether I'm going to have help or no help. And I think sometimes we're really reliant on this world and the physical solid aspects. Like we really hope, we could say the things that are going on this week. I don't really want to get into all that. Wanted to try to talk more about energetic stuff, but we live in this very solid world, but we're not in the present moment. We're not really paying attention, and we feel like these things are happening to us and we have no control over them. But just the fact that we are unconscious and we're haphazardly running through our lives, we expect these solid world structures to actually take care of us when we haven't even given them really an iota, we haven't really even given them an iota of our time that they would be responsible for us or look out for us. And so I think for me, it's really important to actually live kind of as much in a ceremonial process as I can. I mean, I have days where things are so unbelievably crazy, like I'm just barely holding on to a thread. But hopefully there's a moment in there where like the bird lands on my head or, the dog growls at me or, something happens that kind of shakes me out of that, mind control, predictive programming mindset of just throwing myself running through this world. I can stop for a moment and go, oh, wow, look at the energy, that I'm projecting. Why is this dog growling at me and my dog, right? Take a moment and take a look at that. And just, I see people jerk their dogs around different parks with leashes because they only have so much time. And it's like, to me, like, why did you even, take the commitment, the contract, the agreement to take care of the well-being of an animal if this is like how you're going to treat that energy or that point in time and what you're doing, and getting angry because the dog is not really conforming to how you want it to conform. But I think more people kind of need to, well, let me just put it in terms of myself. I am always in need of more practice and more prayer and more in sync with the things that are around that maybe are not seen, and asking the good beings to come forward and help me, and always making sure of that, because otherwise you're going to get what you deserve. You're going to get what you are not asking for, what you're not working with, your attention and your intention and how your intention is going out into the world. So
it's like in psychology almost, because there's the concept or the idea of not thinking of a white elephant. So if you're told don't think of a white elephant, you can't not think of the white elephant, because you have to think of the concept of the elephant in order to not think about it. So I think when it comes to like the difficult things and the challenging things and all the dark forces, if you're trying really hard not to think about them, it seems like it welcomes it even more into the space.
Well, and that's something I've really been monitoring, like so I had Lenny on my show, and we talked about this when Matt Stein died, but we were really good friends with Matt Stein. Matt Stein wrote a book, When Technology Fails, and he was also good friends with Richard Allen Miller, but I was a little bit closer to Matt, and it's it's when I knew that there was the potential, like we're going to get kind of out there, but I had known that there was the potential that there were probably some human type beings on the planet that are hybrids, they're clones, they're androidy. A lot of them have, handlers. I've seen this off and on for a long time, but I hadn't really ever come across like a human androidy thing till I had a situation with Matt Stein literally like a couple months before he died. And his crazy handler, because I went up to his house, and I stayed the weekend up at his house because I was teaching a workshop up at Lake Tahoe. And he was like, yeah, just stay at the house here in Truckee so you don't have to drive back because, there's like a lot of snow or whatever else. So, but his handler was wacko in how she managed and handled him. And I literally watched like an androidy meltdown at some point. And I started to really realize, like, not only do we have all these weird functioning things in society, but we have them even in the alternative movements. We have some of it that has been, put into the infiltration. And it's all, really crazy and really bizarre. But at that point in time, I really started kind of noticing what some people would call the problems with the matrix, glitches going on in the matrix. Is when I really, really had my first big one that actually shook me so hard that it, like, it's almost like I was like a wet shirt and somebody was like, shaking me out violently to hang me on a line. That was kind of like the energy that I felt about the whole thing. But in the last few months, like, I see people that are losing their cognitive abilities, that are literally totally shutting down. And then it makes me realize, like, maybe we have a lot more androidy type people. And I'm not just saying like androidy because of predictive programming and all that. I'm talking androidy, like androids among us that seem human, that, have handlers that may look like their wives, or, to actually, some weird, who knows kind of agendas that are going on. Sometimes it's so out there. It's like, I don't even want to know what the agenda is. Like the day before Tuesday, so it was Monday, I started noticing like a lot of crazy behavior with people just around here. I took my dog out kind of for a long walk around, the better neighborhood. We're out and going for about an hour and a half, walking down the middle of the road of these neighborhoods because there's no cars going through them. And there are literally people that are like stopping in the middle of the road and standing there, like not moving, not blinking their eyes. Their eyes aren't moving around like they're actually thinking. And then the next thing you know, you're standing there watching them going, I wonder if I should like videotape this because it's so crazy and so bizarre. And all these people are so involved in what's going on in the political structures that nobody is paying attention to this glitching system. These humanoidy things that are like literally starting to break down. It's totally bypassed. And then a few minutes later, it's like they just snap on, turn around, and go in a totally different direction. Just like, their light switch went off for a couple seconds, a couple minutes, and then, somebody flipped their light switch back on.
It's like a level beyond dissociating almost. It's like dissociation, you see people like kind of check out. But this is like really checking out. Like they're
Well,
not nobody's home in the
yeah,
first.
I mean, it's either like such prevalent mind control, or it's beings that are hooked up to a computer system and that system is failing. But I see it a lot. And it actually kind of shocks me, you know. And then you have the whole like Matrix thing, which we call Agent Smith. And we see a lot of that too, where you have this Agent Smith, you know, apparatus where, and you know, it's mostly like demonic control and kind of, you know, negative beings. But I see that in a lot of people where all of a sudden, you know, you're walking around the park with your dog and everything's cool. Nobody's noticed you. And then everybody notices you kind of all of a sudden. And then all of a sudden there's like some kind of, you know, like issue that kind of erupts out of the blue. And you have all these people on you, you know, like in the Matrix where when they notice you, you know, like all these crazy things that happen.
It's eerie.
It is, but I mean, it's like the normal world. But I mean, how many people don't even want to like actually deal with like the normal world? I mean, they're not even living in the normal world, and they're just triggered by everything. They're just reactive. And so they're mostly like, you know, they're like a drugged rat in a maze. You know, the light switch goes off and they're on the run for the cheese, you know, trying to find the cheese, trying to get through the maze. And we're all kind of like that right now. And we need to like, not so much get a spiritual backbone, but we need to like just stop, you know, take in some breath and take a look, you know, at everything that's going on around you. Because also too, I think that there's this really important part of spiritual development, which is this whole witnessing. You know, like there's this really important component of you being a witness to the world around you and paying attention to it and noticing it. I think it's a really important part of not really the awakening process, but the conscious thinking part of yourself and being able to make critical decisions about the world and how it's affecting you.
Well, it's that ceremonial aspect, right? Bringing you into present time, or if it's mindfulness, it's a mindfulness practice, but it's practice because it's something where you need to bring your conscious awareness back to it time and time and time again, and to break out of the programming and to break out of the conditioning. And it's tricky. I think this is why people have the markers, whether it be like a meditation bell or the ceremonial garments or like different tools and things like that. It can help to condition the mind, or can help to like trick you and condition or train you into becoming more present, into becoming more mindful. And it gets us out of that fear mindset, because we're so programmed to be in fear. And if we're in fear, we can't do anything, really. Nothing that's going to be constructive. And getting out of that fear mindset, I think, is really important. And I've been working on transcribing some documents, and one of the tidbits of information that came through just kind of stuck with me today is when things start feeling really heavy and feeling really serious, is to bring amusement into it and find some humor to it and find some sort of joke, not necessarily in a degrading way or in a demeaning way, but to find the amusement and the humor, to step outside of it. That part of it's really tricky. There's different tools and things for it, and I found this work out of transcribing some information from some courses through the Psychic Institute, and some of the tools that they incorporate and include in there are the rose tool. And I know you wanted to talk about the yellow rose a bit within this as well, but finding some sort of symbol, archetype, some sort of metaphor, I think, to put this information into. I think this is why art is so important and so helpful within like the healing process, because we can take all that energy and then put it into something outside of us and then process it outside of us. Like in a ceremony, you can take the spirit from within you, put it outside of the self, and then work with it and process with it. So I'm curious to know what this yellow rose is that you were talking about, that you had mentioned.
Oh, it's she's a yellow rose for Texas, and she talks about some really extreme conscious stuff on her channel. I've been following her for like 10 years. And she's not for the faint of heart, and she's really hard for most people to grasp because people just, it's like that whole, maybe there could be people on Earth that are androidy, and maybe there could be, extreme beings. But she posted a really good thing late yesterday because I was thinking about talking about, energetic beings and some of the ceremonial stuff. I mean, the heavy stuff that started in 2014. We talked about me finishing this process that's been going on since 2014, but and then she posted what she did, and it goes back to 2016, and I thought, wow, that's pretty trippy. Like we're kind of like, on the same on the same vibe. Probably have like the same beings like pushing us around over here, trying to get information out. But she posted a really killer video on. She's been collecting for years the photos, the pictures that they take of the sun. So they use, some stuff to kind of, block out how intense it is when they're taking pictures of it. But she's been taking so many pictures of it. She did a collage of these photos of the sun since 2016. And when they're in a collage form, you start to notice that the sun has changed an immense amount. Like the scope of the illumination that's coming from it. And there's all this other interesting stuff that goes on. You can see where they try to block things out, probably UFOs or whatever, when they're taking these images. And then you can also see all these other things like pathways into the sun, how they change. And it's really interesting because you start to look at it as like a digital record playing. And I posted that on her thing. I said, it's like it's like a computer, download, and you're watching the downloads and how they're going front and back and reverse, and how like it looked in old computer systems, when things spun this way and then they would spin that way. I said it just looks like giant, 4 years of downloading into the sun. And the thing that's really interesting about the sun is, I mean, you hear a lot of people talking about, right now is a really important time to get out in the sunlight, because I call sunlight a silent nutrient, because the sunlight actually has data and information that's downloaded into us. And like on a health level, over the last 20 years, and this was brought up recently in one of my anthroposophy medicine courses, about how we're taking in like no streams of information and data. If we look at the sun being the largest generator of power, and in a lot of the shamanism work that I've done with doing like physical movement passes that generate power, clear power, generate power, can recover power that we've lost so that you can overcome illness. Just lots of different reasons that you would do them. A lot of them are engaging with the sun and using that to pull in, chunks of information, data, and light into the systems of your body. So a lot of my native work that I've done, a lot of the shamanism type work I've done, lots of fire type ceremonies, which is, the same as the sun. Even, lightning can kind of come into play, in some of this type of work, because it's all has to do with fire, electricity, lightning, the sun. It's all kind of the same format. It just looks a little bit different. It's the same as like water. water is water. You got an ocean, you got a river, you got a drop, you got a raindrop, you got, water coming through your tap. And it may all have kind of different activations, but the same can be said with like fire type work or medicine. So we're looking at an anthroposophy medicine that over the last 20 years, people have become physically colder, like considerably colder. And so in the class, we're speculating because so many people, and that also the streams of sun seem to be getting intense. And so Steiner also has a whole arena of work about the sun and the sun beings who live in the sun who are assisting us, that are like our family, and where we came from, because the earth was birthed out from the sun. So Steiner talks about it, and that when we were ether, when part of our, body was ether, and we were in the sun before we made the choice to take on the human evolution. And so we split at that point. But the sun beings are always trying to help us by sending us data and information. And so for me, putting Steiner with a lot of my native work really kind of helped me to kind of figure out exactly what was going on. So a lot of the fire ceremonies that I've done with my native teachers, have beings, like we're talking full scale beings, like all different kinds of beings. You can see solar beings, you can see water beings, you can see beings coming from the sky, all kinds of beings that come into interaction, when like you move into ceremony. But we're not going outside and taking in the rays. And then we also have these chemtrails, right, that are being mapped over the planet, which actually block us from a lot of the certain types of data. People would call them rays, but certain types of data and information coming from the sun. So the sun is like, the sun and the sun beings are like heating up. They're trying to get this information down onto the planet, right, to help us to change and make changes. And, we're not getting it. And then on top of it, we spend a lot of time inside, and our bodies are becoming so much colder. And it's like the norm. I mean, here's medicine again, hiding something from the public, that people's bodies are becoming so much colder. And it's actually, in some cases, it's shockingly percentage of how much different the body temperature is. And so that's a lack of you being able, we could call it a vitamin 3 deficiency. We could call it a vitamin A deficiency. We could call it, whatever kind of deficiency we want, because nutrients are actually basically data and information that are taken into the program of the machine we're running, which is called the human body.
Well, I have a question, because we talked a little bit about the sun last week, and with the sun and like all these full moons, like we've had like a couple of full moons, are just like really strange, I wouldn't say strange, but rare events happening around the moon, and these like lunar events probably within the last year and a half, maybe 2 years or so. But the moon is associated with like lunacy, right? Especially full moons. Like if you take in full moon energy, or if you're out under that light, then you're taking in some crazy stuff. But then I've heard like other weird stuff about like just things on the moon, or things living on the moon, or how, I don't know, there's all kinds of weird theories about what the moon itself is. But it reflects back sunlight too. So is there like any benefit from being in the moon as much as there is in the sun, or how are moon ceremonies different than sun ceremonies?
Well, I mean, sun work is always more, in traditions I've been in, is more male work, and moon work has always been more type feminine work. But anymore, I just think that they're computers that are producing frequencies and information, that are being sometimes radiated out on the planet. And I'm not even so sure anymore that the moon we have now is a moon that we had before. Because there have been a lot of people who have been kind of going down this, road about certain types of moonlight, and that maybe the moon is different than the moon that used to be there. And then there's this other, whole work on that the way that the moon sort of shines light down to our planet. Actually, I mean, scientifically, it's been really looked at that there's no possible way that it's actually mirroring sunlight, right? That this light has to be coming, from something completely else, and something that we don't even really know. And then there are times where I just look in the heavens and the only thing I can be certain of is the sun, because number one, I can feel it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can physically feel the sun, and I can feel when the sun is not there.
Well, sunburn definitely hurts.
Right. I mean, and that brings us to a whole other, dynamic. People who are white, they burn. They get a sunburn. It's a radiation burn, right? People who are ethnic, they don't burn. And, like Native American people and African people, they have up to like 50, it would be the equivalent of 50 sunblock in their skin. So that tells us, like, white people, we could say a lot of these stories are true about maybe the races of Anunnaki or all these other extraterrestrial races that developed humanoids for slavery on the planet, because it kind of looks like, I've watched a whole bunch of lectures on this by people who are pretty smart, that, if you have a species of humans that burn from, the sun on that planet and actually get radiation burn, so they can't really walk long distances. They can't really, like, work outdoors from sundown to sun up. That it's highly suggestive that that group of people didn't evolve here on the planet, are not original to the planet. So there's a lot of, like, strange things that most of us don't really, look at. I don't know, I guess I'm ultra strange, or these things, really play into health for me. So I think that I kind of overlook into some of this kind of stuff and take courses that most people probably don't take courses. But we have this thing that's going on, directly with the sun. And I'll just kind of briefly tell this story really quick. But so my native teacher, who passed in June 2016, was amazing. All my native teachers have been just amazing, including my great-grandmother, who had powers that I've only seen one other person in this planet, actually have. My great-grandmother on my mom's side. And so my teacher, when he came along, I had this moment in 2014 where I could decide to keep doing the same thing that I was doing, which I was getting nowhere. And I was getting jumped on. I was getting Agent Smith, because I was being forced to, like, all of a sudden either commit here or just leave, take your stuff and leave, kind of energy that was coming at me. So I decided to go, and I hit the road, and I headed up to Sandpoint, where my teacher was doing 10 days of ceremony to clear a lot of, he did these earth healing ceremonies for the water and the soil. And what we did was we would release all the murder and violence that happened in these places. And a lot of them have Native people, murder of Native people. And that's kind of like the baseline across the whole United States of all the energy that we have in the United States, is the mass murder of people. And so he was been traveling for 16 years to do these earth healing ceremonies that I went to go learn. And also, he was a really smart guy. He worked on getting a master's degree, I believe, in geology, and mostly his tribe sent him to school to try to figure out what the white people were doing, because they couldn't figure out why white people, did the things that they did. So he kind of had, he had this killer PowerPoint presentation. He talked about the earth. His change in life came. He, was a raging alcoholic and drunk on his reservation, and he was married, and he had this extraterrestrial event that happened on the night that he was the most hammered and taken the most drugs and alcohol that he had ever consumed. He didn't really expect to make it the next day. He was young, and these extraterrestrials opened a porthole in his house and proceeded to come through, and then this like hieroglyphs, like Egyptian-like but not Egyptian, level came down, and he could see them all while he was laying in his bed. And then at some point, he called it the electric blue Thunderbird, came through the hole. At this point in time, he's standing on the bed, and he's got his hand up in the grid, because he's trying to figure out, because he's so wasted, if it's really happening, or maybe he's dying, maybe he's crossing over, maybe this is what's happening, So the Thunderbird comes, lands on the bed, this electronic Thunderbird, and it wraps its whole system like around him. And when he doesn't really remember how long he was like that, but it completely cleaned him up of alcohol and drugs. And after it let go of him, he was completely sober, and he completely walked away from the life that he had been living that had brought him to that crisis in his life. And he started working with extraterrestrial beings who needed help to help start clearing the energy on the planet so that the planet could start fighting for its life, because the planet had like no energy. It was completely dead. All the ley lines, all the oil that we'd been taken out of the ground. And so he had like a whole teaching on this. And then also how we're to go about doing these earth healing ceremonies to restore meridian lines and ley lines on the earth, and to clear up the original sins that are compounding all the other energy on top of it. And I witnessed some just, working with him, some just incredible stuff. And early on, he was just so awesome, because I would go somewhere to clear something up. And if I didn't think that I did a really good job, I'd ask him, can you, when you go through that area, can you just take a look? Can you just take a peek just to make sure, like I did it really well? And there were a couple instances where I've done some of these ceremonies where, like, because I'm, helping to process this energy, and the energy's so unbelievably, you just can't even begin to believe how horrible what happened to these people. Like you just couldn't believe it. But having to witness it, and I have to re-witness it as it runs through, and clearing out these areas. But he would come through and help and make sure that I did a really good job. He was just awesome about it. And so during that time frame, 2014, I also had a visit from, and this is something I don't really talk super public about. I had a visit from my star family. So up until that point in time, my star family was using me. I would have a dream about an object, and then, within a couple months, I would find that object like in the desert or on the side of the road, or it would just appear in my car. I would have things that would just literally fall from the roof of my car into my car. And it took me a while to kind of figure out, what was going on, but they were collecting information because they couldn't really get directly in here. This is when I really started noticing that there's a problem, that there was some kind of like veil over the planet, over Earth, and that some beings were being obstructed from being able to find out what was going on here. And so what they would do is they'd send out these objects. And so basically I would carry them around. I'd put them in my car. I'd put them in my backpack, tie them around my dog's neck. Just whatever I felt like I should do with the object, take them to ceremony, you know. And then there would always be a moment when I would know when, you know, I'd have to give it back. And there would be this moment where I just have this awareness, like, okay, I need to go over here. I'm driving down the highway, and, you know, I'd get like a message like, okay, now is the time to pull over. You see that tree over there, put the object over there and drive off. So it was kind of like a weird thing that they were sending me objects that look like everyday objects, but were kind of misplaced in the, you know, in the total picture, and that they were computer, you know, things that were collecting information and data, mostly about how I felt about being here, events, you know, things of that nature. And what happened was it culminated to this moment where I just really hated being here on this earth. I just really hated everything about it. And I would literally tell my star family, like, daily, like, please do not send anybody else here. Like, don't send anybody here, because they're not going to be able to make it. They're not going to be able to survive here. This is a brutal, brutal, brutal planet. So on my way to go do ceremony, I was going through this canyon in my van, Twisty Canyon. And there's always a trigger, some kind of trigger that happens. And then that's when, you know, like, they pull me up to talk to me. And I had gone through this really bad spiritual place of, like, I really felt like I had fallen from grace because they weren't communicating. Like, I just really didn't have much communication from them anymore. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. And it just, you know, it was just in a really, really just bad place on so many levels. So I'm driving through this canyon in California on my way up to Idaho, and there was this weird song that plays on the radio, so weird, that I actually turned the radio off. And then 20 minutes later, I turned the radio back on, and there's all this weird static, and then all of a sudden this song plays again. It's like so weird. Well, the second time it was a trigger. And so I don't know who was driving the van, but I was up with them. And they just, you know, it was like a desperate moment that they had to reach out because, you know, they wanted to come clean with their part in what they had done during my life experience here. And they wanted to give me some information about that they picked me to come here, that they knew that I was going to be strong. And in some cases I was too strong. And in order to kind of keep me on the road, to keep me going to carry out my mission, which I think, you know, it may be close to being over because I think I was just here to help them collect data. And so they pulled me up, and I was in this space where it was dark, and there was these really tall chairs, and I knew that there were a whole bunch of other, like, extraterrestrial type beings, though I couldn't see them. And then the woman in front of me was like my mother. Like, she had this mother feeling, and light was emanating from her body. But I could feel all these other beings sitting in these chairs, like 200 of them, but it was in the dark, and this light. And so I started to engage her, and she started to talk to me telepathically. And then there were like 7 lines of information that just totally flowed and all kind of came into my head at once. And about the things that they had to do to me. You know, I've had 7 major head injuries in my life that I shouldn't even be walking and talking I've had brain cancer, for level 4 brain cancer. And so they disclosed that a lot of the stuff that had happened to me was their doing. Because in some cases I needed to really be restrained back, and they had to really restrain me back to hold me back. And that, they knew that I probably wasn't going to be really happy about this information. And so once, I was in that moment with them and getting all this information, I really had this huge emotional release, because I was like, thank God, thank God you guys are like talking to me and disclosing information. Well, shortly after that, I realized, like, here's the people who are supposed to care about me the most, and they've done some really horrible things. They've initiated situations in my life that were so brutally horrible. And then so I went through this really long period where I was just super angry. So they actually wouldn't let me come to Reno. So I ended up having to live in my van, crossing the United States. It was this crazy, I call it, the vision quest from hell. And I was in rest stops. I couldn't get money to get where I needed to go. I was going for jobs, and then the jobs would fall through, and there was just so much crazy stuff. I mean, there was like, I ended up kind of on the East Coast, and there was so much heavy demonic activity. And this man who had been an exorcist for 20 years, reached out to me and really kind of helped me square some stuff away. And so it was just like a really crazy period, but it was the beginning of this living in this ceremonial life. So as I was crossing the United States, I was taking a lot of the medicines from these fires, from these ceremonies, taking the ash. We had plants. We had a lot of stuff that we used in the altars, and was taking that up with me in the van so that I could do ceremonies where I was called to get off the highway. There would be like a light or some anomaly that would happen that I would know that I have to get off the highway and I have to go there and I have to perform a ceremony. I have to perform a blessing. And so this went on. And so what happened is that I really started to see beings. And as of 2014, pretty much every photo I take now has something in it, has some kind of being in it. So much so that, I mean, when I have to send a picture out to somebody like my herbal teacher, she sees the things in it and people are just astounded. But that's just because I've opened up like a whole other realm. But I was in this rest stop in coming across Pennsylvania on one of those big, commercial toll roads. And I had been crashed there. I had been really attacked badly by, and it was just a drive-by by a really dark force, but it left me sick, so sick and shuddering. And me and my dog are, in my van in this rest stop for literally 5 days. I was so sick, like I couldn't even stand up. And eventually some friends, sent me some money. It was so hard to get the money to move on. This thing was like just trying to kill me, but I pulled myself back up, got it together, and then got on the road and started heading back. Well, I went and got a coffee at the Starbucks. I started out on the highway. I literally pretty much dropped this hot coffee right in my lap. And I looked up in the sky and there was this crazy cloud being. I mean, it was huge, and it was like right there where everybody could see it, and it had like a bird face and this huge plume, and it had this chest that looked like carved wood, and it had this genie type lower body, and it was the only thing in the sky. And I had to pull off to the side of the road. The next thing I know, it's like I'm starting to kind of have one of those phases, mediumistic phases, where, it starts to talk to me, and it tells me that I need to let my teacher know that everybody's doing enough ceremonies, like the ceremonies are coming through, that the beings are ready to get involved with the humans and help, that they had not wanted to be involved with the humans for a long time, and that they were back in the game, and that they were going to help us fight. And that was probably, I would say, late October 2014. And so systematically, I've just seen over and over and over again this energetic stuff behind what we see and how they're moving in closer to like build relationships and putting in data and putting in information and putting in what's needed to help us to drive this through what we need to drive it through. But, you know, it takes our will. Like, we have to be willing to change what that change looks like in order to actually move forward. But I think we're going to be having a break here. Are you still there? Okay. Break.
Break.
Freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Alrighty, everybody. Hey, we're rolling back in for the second hour. I can't believe how fast the shows I do with Kelsey are.
They go by so fast every time.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's really good. Anyway, Kelsey had a little knockout with her dog and bloodbath, and so she's recovering right now.
I know, you're so funny. You're like, I didn't mean to take over the show. I'm like, it's okay. Got knocked out.
Man down, just can't report it.
She's the littlest dog, and I was trying to help her up on the bed because we're all kind of cuddled up here, like around radio time, and she jumped at the same time I lifted her, and boom, just like busted the skin across my face. Okay. So I've been navigating that. But blood always happens, I guess. The blood sacrifice comes out when it needs to. Well, I was thinking this earlier when you were talking about like the ley lines being broken around the earth and how there's all the murders of the indigenous people. Like, there's a lot of iron in blood, and iron's magnetic, right? And so, like, we take out all the oil and we spill blood all over the place. Like, no wonder why things are all out of whack.
Yeah, I mean, you think about, like, just like Yellowstone, right? It's like one of the largest calderas on the planet. My teacher that was one of his jobs. So he would go whenever he would get a call about the Yellowstone caldera because he was from a tribe in that area. And so he became one of the elder caretakers of it. So he would go in and do ceremony until like the vents would open and the steam would be released. And then Emoto, you know who Emoto is? Yeah, so Emoto found out about what he was doing. So Emoto used to come and he'd bring his, Japanese clan to Yellowstone, and they would do their water work and help my teacher. So I didn't really get to actually witness all that. I'm sure it was awesome. And so we'd laugh. My teacher is super funny. Most Native people, especially medicine people, are so funny because things just do not get them down. They just, they laugh through everything. And so he used to try to, do Emoto. And so he'd say, yeah, I try to teach Emoto how to do the whole earth healing ceremony. And he said, Emoto would say, no, I only do water. It was just super funny because he was like, no, I'm only doing the water. Like, I don't want to do the rest of it. You do the rest of it. You do what you do, but I'm here to do the water.
I'm so fascinated by Emoto's work. I talk about his stuff a lot. I've mentioned him a few times in my radio show and some of my research because it's the power of words, right? And you use this vibration and the frequency.
The power. it's the power of you in you. I just took this killer class. It was called the something of the organs and the psychology of the organs and how they relate to us and all this other stuff. But one of the things they showed was that, when the cell divides, when first, they're going back and they're doing a lot more research like on the egg and the sperm. But they were showing that the egg, it will kind of like move back and forth. And so like the sperm kind of almost attach onto it and they start driving it and they can actually spin it. And then they also talked about, what if there's a type of frequency or sound that's not heard, but it's created by movement, which is a very shamanism thing, right? It's created by the movement, the sounds of your steps, the tone of your voice, how your spoon hits your plate, like all these things create something positive or negative. And so they were showing like the cell and the development, like with the sperm and when the sperm gets in and then the cellular division of that cell until it becomes, something solid and visible. And it was interesting because, the cell division starts to kind of look chimatica, it starts to look, and then you're watching this rotation and all these different things going on. So this class is like really kind of pushed me towards that vibration. It's not just sound, not just words or instruments or anything else, but can actually be subtle movement. So it makes you think about, do you sound like an elephant walking across your house, like hard and heavy? Is your life hard and heavy? Is that the vibration of the information that you get back that, deals with your reality? There was this book that I read a long time ago about this monk who had been at this monastery forever. And he talked about what he learned over 25 years in the monastery, which was a lot more than he thought because he came out into the public and was living and everyone was so loud. Cars were loud. People were loud. How people move themselves around. The sprinklers in their yard were loud. Like everything was so loud in contrast to his life in the monastery. And he said he basically learned how to open and close doors. Like in the monastery, like he said you learn to walk super fast, like you're not even touching the ground because you cannot make sound because it reverberates through the whole place. So he said he learned to open and close doorknobs. He said it's almost like energetically to where they don't make sound. The doorknob doesn't make a sound. You're not leaving an imprint of your energetic signature all over everything. You're participating with it, but you're participating with it in a clean way where you're not imprinting anything. You don't imprint that doorknob. You don't imprint that door, and all through movement, which
That
I think is
resonates
interesting.
with technology in me because I feel especially with computers, if I start getting super anxious or uptight or pent up, or if I'm not breathing, or even if just thoughts in my head are getting too chaotic, things won't load on my computer. They'll go super slow. But if I can breathe and kind of reshift the focus, and all of a sudden things are loading and they'll move. Yeah, no, technology gets me like that all the time. It's frustrating.
Well, no, but I think we're imprinting on all of it. It's all about, and then, think about how much the world just really imprints on us. And then, it's hard because there's this line, what am I really responsible for? Am I, in fact, responsible for, the husky that the neighbors left on their third-story patio for the last 48 hours, and it's crying and it's distressed. Am I responsible for that? Do I need to aid and assist it? Is it holographic? Am I creating it? Did I imprint the situation to happen to where it would be so loud in, my vicinity that I can't really think about anything else but this poor crying dog, So you have to kind of think about, and I think that solid, solid earth responsibility for things actually it plays out in a part of that frequency, regardless if you generated it and imprinted it, into your reality or not. I think, the actual movement now more than ever of me moving towards a solution towards it actually changes it, right? Changes everything about it.
In like a butterfly effect sort of way, in the sense that everything is all combined, everything is all fragmented.
Think about how many levels there could be. You could have the thought level, right? That's sending out some kind of signal. You can have the verbal, your mouth, your sounds, the way your body moves and its sounds, how you eat, if you cling your teeth with the spoon, what kind of sounds you're making. Then there's the actual action of you moving out into your world and, dealing with things around you. There's so many I think different levels of things that are coming off of us, into the world. And I think because the way this world is, it also makes it easier to rapidly create more of the, not so great stuff towards us than the light. And, there are a lot of shaman type people who are very powerful who, they left this world early on. That's, something that the Aztecs did, and some of these other civilizations who are aware of this kind of work, is that, they didn't just vanish off Earth. They consciously left as a group together and created their own world together, and probably close adjacent to this one, because this is just a really difficult world.
In like sort of like a parallel reality context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I took this really cool class. This is something I really like to talk about, but I was involved with these people who came from kind of the lineage of Don Juan, who was Carlo Castaneda's teacher. And then there were a whole bunch of other people that were in that group. And so I ended up doing some work, not directly, but in a group offset with some of these people that had trained with these other people who were out of this world, let's just say that. And I always had that propensity. In high school, I read Lynn Andrews' books, and I think a lot of people were unnerved by the character called Twin Dreams. But that is exactly what, like if you wanted a career choice in life, I wanted to be like her, where she learned how to stay in her same body and it didn't age, and she could go, through timelines back and forth and between different kinds of dimensions. And she would just show up out in the desert, like they hadn't seen her in a while, and here she just walked through the crack of time, right into their, campsite and sit down. And Lynn said that it really like unnerved her, like how this kind of stuff could happen. But so I always kind of gravitated towards more, I guess, of the South American lineages, like the Yaqui and Toltecs, and people that kind of move along more kind of what I think mainstream you would call like dreaming medicines. But these are sober ones. These are not ones where we actually take dreaming medicines of like peyote or DMT or ayahuasca. We're the type of shamanism that I've practiced all these years is one of sobriety, that we want to achieve out of this world results completely sober, which means that it's going to take us a lot longer to get there without using any kind of crutches. But ultimately, we won't need anything or anyone else to drive our experience, right? Or drive our knowledge, or drive our power. So I went to this workshop. I can't remember. I think there were like 400 people there, but there could have just been like 200 people there. And when we kind of all got together, a lot of us were learning. They had the three big people, big power people, shaman people, who were holding the field in a lot of ways. And then they had their their apprentices, and then their apprentices were kind of carrying out the work that we're going to do. And we did some magical pass work, and the work was really designed to open up the primordial information in our DNA strand that goes back. You know, our bodies have a lot of this information because they're computers that go back to the beginning, you know, and everything was water. And so I learned some strumming exercises with, you know, my webbing in my hands and in my feet, and actual physical movements, and a whole bunch of other work that went along with it. There was a point in this workshop, like halfway through, where I literally was not functioning I was in the physical reality, but I was not functioning in the physical reality. Like I couldn't actually accomplish something in the physical. And there was a moment where I had this moment where I noticed I was in my head, and then the top of my head peeled back, and I saw myself way there in my brain. And I thought, I'm making all this up. I'm thinking it, you know, like it's not, you know, real. It's all happening in my mind. And then I look up on the wall, and there's this huge glass window, and there's like this huge reptile being outside of the building, like looking in the window. So it was being completely sober and not taking drugs. Like, these things are possible. So anyway, our one teacher, who was from the lineage of people who stayed, I think from the Aztecs that disappeared. I can't remember if it was the Mayans or the Aztecs that she was from, that her people kind of missed the bus when all this happened, or consciously chose to stay on this timeline, something like that. So she took us outside of the building. It's like this huge 10-story building where we're having this workshop together. And she has us like not look at the whole building, but from wherever we're standing, and she puts us in 3 lines, top, you know, tallest to shortest. And we stare at this building for 2 hours. We just stand there and stare at it. But we only stare at the one piece that's easy for us to stare at. So I look at the whole area on that building. I'm like really taking in the window, how the window is structured. So for 2 hours, I'm really taking in just this one little piece, right, that I'm staring at, really, really getting all the details. So that way, if I had to recall it in my mind, I could go through the whole thing and recall every little teeny detail. So once we're done, we go in, and she tells us the story that her people basically dreamt together. So what we're doing is we're doing dreamingism type shamanism, which helps you to kind of bypass, you know, the laws that are here, but be here at the same time. And she said that they knew that, you know, they could look into the timeline and see what's going on, and we're told and things like that. So before, you know, the time where they were going to be completely massacred, they practiced as a whole people together, and they would go down and they would sit in these big city centers, right, with their pyramids and everything else. And they would do this activity where they all would stare at a piece of their city, the food, the gardens, you know, the water, the lushness, because they wanted to take all the plants and the food and everything else with them. So then what happened was right before they were going to be like super massacred, or the ones that could accomplish this, they could snap themselves using some of these higher, you know, power shamans. I'm not sure these people were shamans. I think that they were probably multi-dimensional beings that helped them, kind of a thing, to be able to snap them into a different space. But she said that that's where they went. So they have their whole city there. They get to live exactly how they want to live. They took everything with them because everybody had a piece of the puzzle. Not one person had to make it up, didn't have to actually construct a reality, because each person had a part of the reality that they could project. And so she said that's what the practice was for, was so that you know, learning how to work together, I think, with other people kind of on a common goal energetically like that. But it was a pretty powerful, it was such a powerful, unbelievable, like 5 days that, I drove home and everything had changed. There was there was literally buildings that used to be in Reno that weren't there anymore. There were some new buildings. Like it was like this reality, but like it had changed. Or maybe I noticed things that were changed in it, like I just don't really know, but it was really radical when I drove back into Reno after all this.
Reno is an interesting place, like just the energy here in and of itself, and then trying to reorganize and realign the energy here is interesting because you've got all these like underground water channels, and you've got a handful of native tribes that have just been
Massacred.
Yeah, and then shoved into, a couple of acres, if that, of land, and there's just, I don't know, like I've had a couple of just strange experiences just coming back into Reno or leaving Reno. There's just a sense of newness or being in like a new mindset or a new perspective. I don't know if that's just because of Reno or not, or it's just of these like coming to's of new awarenesses because of this. But every time that veil gets lifted, everything feels so new, but it's hard to tell whether or not like things were there or not. Like so much of what we experience is so unconscious, and out of the trillions and trillions and trillions of stimuli around us at any given point in time, we can only attend to a couple of them. There's only a handful of things. So there's so much that the world is doing to mold and to shape us. So I always get caught up in this idea of the world is molding and shaping us to create the life, right? Then it kind of puts you in this victim mentality. But when it comes to manifestation and creating and co-creating the world around, there's this interesting dynamic. So like how much is it that you're really responsible for? How much is it that the system is responsible for? And I guess it doesn't necessarily matter at the end of the day when you kind of wake up and realize the whole system isn't what you were taught the system was, and that there are like these different beings and entities and energies and things around us that guide and direct us. It's strange, but it feels real. And I think like the information that comes through it is helpful, and the levels of understanding that you get to are really powerful. And to do so in a sober way, that one's interesting too. I think there's like a really big push right now for everybody to be so intoxicated, and although certain drugs and substances can get you to new levels of understanding, I mean, if you're not doing it, I can't even say mindfully or respectfully, but in a way that's guided in that honors or in a ceremonial aspect, and you open yourself up to all sorts of things, all sorts of funky energies, all sorts of funky beings. And
right, but you know that, okay, so dreaming medicines are only really supposed to be used for a health crisis, so that you can go in and get the information you need to heal your body, right? It's not meant for you to actually, travel. And, this is what happens too, is because I've done a lot of that stuff with the right people. I've been really lucky, but I don't like it. I don't like any of it. I don't like how it sweeps me off to where it makes my mind fragmented, because in shamanism, you have to learn how to be awake and asleep, like night dreaming all at the same time. And most people go into doing these medicines by just totally letting themselves go. And you can get in some serious, serious trouble. For example, a really good friend of mine, that's how I met him, is he found me through the internet for help, because he had been haphazardly recreationally doing some of these dreaming medicines, and he got piggybacked by a being that's just nasty. She is like, part spider and also part scorpion. Sometimes she's both. I mean, he's woken up after battling, her in the dreaming world, and had, like bite marks on his feet, and then the foot swell up and he has to go to the hospital, and The doctors have no idea what it is. They tell him it's like gout.
Right.
But, he has to deal with that for the rest of his life because there is no getting rid of it or putting it someplace. Because, that's the thing is some of these like New Age people, like just clear the energy and just do this and do that. And then what? Leave it? What do you just leave it all over?
Where
Right?
does it go? Yeah, or I think it's
Right.
funny all the time that people are like, take all your pain and all your whatever and dump it into the earth. And then
Yeah, thanks for
put
that.
your energy cord into the earth and then pull all that pain and energy back into your body.
Yeah. Because we can't be full beings and we can't stand up and we can't be responsible. But I've had a lot of people over the last 10 years since I've had a website that come across my website that contact me. Like right now, I have somebody in Reno. I have a morning Zoom meeting with them to talk about what's going on with them. And they sent me photos of literally, full hand mark bruises on her husband's stomach, and they're just getting really beat up by whatever's there in their house. But a lot of people don't realize, like, sometimes just messing with simple things, if you have a place that has more darker sinister energy, all it takes is a deck of tarot cards. All it takes is giving them some type of doorway. And then you're not having boundaries or rules of engagement, right? You're not the one that is making, the rules of engagement, which, like traditional shamanism, sober, you cross through those worlds, but you're intact with your critical mind and your critical thinking. So when you're engaged with beings who are trying to manipulate you or overpower you or do whatever they're going to do, you're ready and you're aware and you know how to deal with them. When you're taking some of these dreaming medicines, you're so far checked out that you don't even know what the heck is really going on. And in every world, in the level structure here, there's like 64 layers. So it's like a hotel with 64 floors. And then you have like the lower, they're not really lower, but you have,
7 layers with 7 layers each, or like each 7, like there's 7 layers with 7 layers.
No, it's just 64. It's like, I look at it like a hotel. And then on each level, there's all kinds of people who live on those levels. There's good beings, bad beings. Some of the even good beings are tricksters because they want to just see what your intelligence level is. But then because you're checked out, you deserve to get whatever you get. But sometimes people have experiences with these beings and changes their life and they go and do something else, and sometimes not. And a lot of people end up destroyed kind of after some of these experiences with these dreaming medicines because, they're using them from something that they're not supposed to be used for. They're supposed to be used in a health crisis, like emergency, hospital, 911. That's the kind of medicine is. It's the 911 medicine. I got to, get in touch with my good spirits and, the creator. Like right now, I got to take these medicines because I've got to sort out this issue. It isn't meant to be like, I think I'll travel through the universe.
Or just the fun stuff. Like, I have a good friend of mine who I watched several years ago go from, like, person A onto this acid journey, where it's, like, every weekend for a number of months, just trip after trip after trip. And maybe after a good year or two of all these trips, he ended up with grand mal seizures. And person A is not there anymore. It's definitely person A, like person B, or maybe even person C at this point. Because in watching the transition from person A into the person who experienced all the grand mal seizures, into the person who's now coherent enough to be able to function as a somewhat normal person, it's difficult, I think, to watch people go down that path, because you see these brilliant, phenomenal people who think that by taking these trips and taking these journeys and just going full-fledged and full under, that they'll come out with some amazing power or something. But
Well,
they don't.
they'll figure out, like, either how to bypass this reality or control it, and you're never going to learn anything from that. But get your friend A was gutted.
Yeah.
So your friend A was like no longer even there. They weren't even available, because every time he'd go out, he was gutted by just the shift that stole energy from him.
So much to the point where, I mean, he couldn't even function in this plane. He couldn't even function in this reality without seizing, without having just this full on breakdown between the mind, body, spirit connection. It was pretty intense.
Yeah, well, it doesn't sound like he had enough energy to run his physical body anymore, because it had been so looted. So it's really important. People don't just die. They die because of the, your energy field around you is like a saran wrappy kind of thing. And so the easiest way that I can explain it is that and a lot of these shaman people that, that also have put out work. I mean, even Don Juan talked a lot about how this world just batters you over and over again. And every time you have a situation, it will puncture your field, and you'll leak energy all over through your life. And then you just get to a point where there's no more energy left in your field, where shamanism, they teach you how to like fill. And for a long time, when I was doing a lot of online sessions, most of the sessions I was doing was to help people to get over certain kinds of illnesses. So while I was helping them get their diet and stuff organized, I'd also have to fill them with enough energy that they could actually accomplish these things, because they're at the point of dying. And so how do you know that your field is running out of energy? And so we're totally lied about this too. It's panic attacks. Yeah. So when you get to a point where your field is depleted with enough energy, it starts to tighten around you. And so you start to experience panic attacks like this, suffocating, but you don't know exactly what it is. But basically it's your field really kind of starting to suffocate you, because it doesn't have any energy left in it. So the whole point of like old 10,000 year traditional types of shamanism that I've learned is to actually fill your sphere up continuously, because there isn't going to be anything else that's going to be able to fill it up but you. And through different types of physical movements, energy movements, and then mostly about walking through the world, and not being reacted by what's going on no matter what it is, and always trying to stay neutral and balanced, which is, not always so easy. But this keeps you from leaking out energy out of your field. And so it's, you hit a certain period in your life, depending on what you've gone through, and you have to spend the rest of that part of your life constantly filling your field. Otherwise, you're going to have panic attacks, because that's kind of like the signal that you don't die of cancer. You die because there's no energy in your field. Because if you had enough energy in your field to run your body computer, then you wouldn't have gotten cancer and died. Because all illness and anything that's going to kill you is a program. It's a sequence. And they'll tell you that when you get something, you're missing a sequence, right? So like a nutritional deficiency, or say you eat too much sugar and you get like a candida overgrowth, and then candida is fungus, and that's what most tumor cancer is. So you get that because you don't have information and data in your computer system to override that viral program. So it all comes down back to energy. But we're not taught in this world how it really, really works. And then people have all these crazy ideas. And so people will say, well, how do you know that filling your field works? Well, I had stage 4, stage 5 brain cancer. By the time I found out, I was super big into rock climbing. I fell off a roped climb. I didn't get hurt or anything like that. But I was on the ground for an hour and a half because I blacked out on the climb, and I couldn't get up. I had vertigo so bad that I couldn't even lift my arm to do anything about it. So that's how I knew something was wrong with me. And then eventually I found a naturopathic, amazing medical intuitive that totally helped me, because I was not going to do medical. I tried to get some blood tests done with medical. It was just so crazy. I just, didn't rely on that growing up, and I just wasn't going to rely on it for cancer, and I was going to be okay if I was going to pass this world. That's just the fact, Jack. So, but I couldn't, even with diet and all this other stuff, I got, right to the edge, but I couldn't get over. I couldn't completely heal the cancer. And then I got well enough to where I could actually start working on, doing a lot of different types of recapitulating, generating, a lot of these other shamanism things that I had learned that kind of had been on the back burner for a long time, and I wasn't fully committed to them. And then after that, I've just been fully committed to them ever since. But as soon as I started doing a lot of that work, the energetic work, then everything healed so rapidly, it was shocking. So I just needed that energy to get over the hump, because the programming, my body didn't have enough energy in it, in the field, to run a new program, even if I put a new program in.
And I can relate to that, in that at a time when I think I was going through kind of like the very beginning of trauma recovery stuff. There was so much information to take in. It was so overwhelming, and I couldn't really understand why or how things were happening the way that they were, until I saw an alternative healer, and she did some soul memory work and cranial sacral. And just in some of the work that she had done, just in validating what I was experiencing from the energetic level, I was able to make some pretty profound shifts very quickly. Or in being told that I had 470 something entities attached onto my body, and no wonder I was having a hard time discerning what was mine versus what was somebody else's. Shift my conscious thinking, shifted my perspective of the world in such a way where it was almost like I could just snap my finger, I could just snap out of it, or there's this aha moment of, oh, and then being able to connect beyond that step, or kind of to break through that wall, just made some, I guess, very profound healing things happen, that if I wouldn't have come into contact with that sort of stuff, I'd probably be dead, or I'd locked up somewhere. Who knows? I wouldn't be where I am today. And just thinking of all the different things that I have gone through, and all the different things that I've experienced, and especially when it comes to mental health, and never having been medicated for mental health, and having overcome, because I think when it comes to the pharmaceutical drugs, it's a lot like the dream type drugs, where we're given these synthetic chemicals and told that this is what's going to make us better, right? But they don't. They numb us out. But I think that the energetic work within consciousness, within that understanding of this self, of course we're not taught that, and of course we're not told that. Then we'd be healing ourselves, and we'd be overcoming so much of these darknesses and these horrific forces that are at work. And if anything, I think we're seeing a lot of that surface on the collective conscious level. And I think the challenge, or what I'm really grateful about having this radio space here with you, Bridgette, is being able to bring the knowledge forward so people can grasp that, and so they can understand that, so we can make some accelerated growth periods happen on a collective level. But people are just so detached from it. I mean, especially white people. I mean, we've disconnected our connections with these different groups of people through torture and murder and just horrific things. And it's just, hard to fathom or wrap your mind around just how.
Well, what blows me away is like how much of it has been silenced
Right.
from the public. Like that blows me like so far away. But these people have knowledge, they have understanding. They know how to write right. They know how to make it right. They know what to do. And so of course, I could see in this world how they would be, they'd try to, put them out, erase them, because they don't want, their slaves to, wake up or maybe understand things like in a different way, because they're attached to us, working our 9 to 5 and buying a mortgage from them and being enslaved deeper and deeper and deeper. But yeah.
It's no wonder why they're taking such strong measures to keep the people enslaved and to keep the sheeple wrapped up in the pens. I mean, just all the technology advances that are being put to work to keep people at this baseline frequency, and just what's projected in terms of, like, if we're seeing these sorts of androids now, getting to the transhuman, right, where we're cutting out the life force within the being and just turning the human meat suits into these robots that are controlled by machines and computers.
Well, that's what the whole nanoparticle thing is with the chemtrails, they've been spraying on us. We're like, at this point, we're mostly metal. And like 6 years ago, I started having people asking me if I would like check out their, I've been traditional osteopath and been working on people, shamanism, all different levels for almost close to like 30 years. Like I'd work on a kid here and there, or a little birth trauma, the baby or whatever else, to kind of help unravel some stuff so they don't have long-term problems, blah, 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 blah. It wasn't until about 6 years ago where it was just constant. It was like kid after kid after kid. But what you could see was that the nanoparticles that they've been spraying with on us for like, 20 or 30 years, and the chemtrails had in us, they were metals, and they were things that were floating around, hadn't fully like adhered, but were making the transition in us. And then it revealed that, what the children that are 6 years of age to now, the nanoparticles actually bound in them. So, and you can tell this from the kids because the whites of their eyes will have 2 different things in them. They will have these weird kind of looking like gray spots or gray stains. And some of them look kind of like they have scales, but they're not really scaly. And then they also have these black random spots in the whites of the eye. And I started realizing like that is, that's transhuman. I mean, this is why these kids are so plugged into technology and phones, and they can spend huge amounts of time on them and with them, is because the nanoparticles are now bound with their DNA, right? So they are machine. They're hybrid. They're human hybrids at this point. And that's, a hard thing for people to really get, that this whole transhuman thing they're a lot further along in it than we know. They're like, when they've been using metal in the skies to seed things like lead, which causes complete and total brain damage and system failure. They've been using that since the 1940s, spraying it into the air to get places to snow that wasn't snowing. So, they've been at this for a lot longer than we can even imagine. But now we're starting to see it in the offspring that are being developed. It's at that point. Now, I think the important part is that we have to figure out how to move those children away from those technologies so that they don't actually start binding with those kind of technologies, so they become the computer system in the world, right? But that they can maybe harness whatever power or energy from that and utilize it in a kind and tender way, and maybe even a sympathetic way with Earth and nature. Because we need them not to push technology into the future scenario. We need them to push their, powers or ability towards the healing of the planet. I know that was pretty heavy. Are you still there? Did I lose you? You're probably like, that's it. I can't be your co-host anymore.
No, I just looked down and I realized my microphone was muted because I was like, oh, I've got some points. And I kept trying to say things and you kept talking. I was like, bah, but I didn't realize I was muted. But no, okay, so this makes me think, right? Because we've got the trans aspect there. And for somebody who's a researcher in transformative studies, I've been drawn to the concept of like the homo transluminant or the transluminous body. And so in hearing that there's the transhuman, you have the transhuman, but the transhuman is not necessarily the transluminous. Because if you get the transhuman, then that's like humanity going into robot land, right? And dissociating from consciousness altogether.
Well, you would be enslaved simply through the digital system and its commands. So no longer solid, but more you would react based on what the AI in your phone or whatever else was telling you to do.
It's programming. Mm-hmm. But then like you have like the concept of the transluminous, which what I think you're talking about, or hopefully this is where like the kids will take it all, where they'll kind of like wake up to the fact that there's this genetic change that has been forced upon them, but to be able to take that in such a way and connect it within themselves and as that luminous light body that has the capacity to change, adjust, heal all of the particles within itself. So I'm super curious as to how all this stuff is going to play out.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it depends on, our relationship to the kids that are being born at this point in time. And, like, for example, I was at Virginia Lake this summer, and I noticed the corn, it was growing, but it was in distress, and somebody had planted corn on Virginia Lake.
Really?
And I saw it, and I was like, it was like up to my, boob height, but anyway, I was like, oh my God, look at it, there's corn. Somebody did a Johnny Appleseed and like snuck in some corn seeds here. And I mean, it was stressed out. It wasn't going to reach, total maturity because sometimes the seeds in the corn will grow on the top. And then it's gone south. It's bolted for whatever reason. It maybe got too much water, didn't get enough water. Corn can be temperamental a little bit. But anyway, so there's these three kids sitting on a bench, like on their phones, not even talking to each other or playing. And I said, hey, look at this. And they're like, what? And I said, look, somebody planted corn here. They were like, no way. I said, yeah. They go, how do you know that's corn? I said, because I farm. They're like, oh, that's
corn.
I know. So they were like touching it and looking at it. And I said, so next time you guys come down here, give it a nice little pat and thank it, So they were like totally into it. So they went running all over this place and they're trying to drag their mom over there who was not interested in knowing, but it was like sparked something in them. Like instead of your phone in your hand, look, you can actually touch this and it's alive and it'll produce food. And, I gave them like the whole little, education thing. So it was kind of fun. I mean, but kind of like turning them into the transluminous versus, and this is the other thing too, is like, because if we look at the transhuman projection, well, that's Star Trek, and Star Wars. And what are they doing? Yeah. They're blowing each other up. They're like taking over their planet. I mean, they're doing what they do here, but on a much larger scale of dominance and brutality and violence. And so that stuff goes into these kids' heads, as a projection of that's the reality you're going to have, right? That's the future. So, why don't you help us start conjuring that and bringing it closer in that reality? Instead of, hey, you woke up and there's sunlight outside, and hey, why don't you go check under Henrietta and see how many eggs are out there, and teaching them how to use that energy and projecting out into some crazy future fiction that's just downloaded programming. How do you touch them and show them and show them how to give love and tenderness, to things on the planet. I'm not saying, grow wussies or let's feminize, everything. But I think caring, stewardship can be very masculine as well.
There's a finesse in it.
There's a balance. I mean, there's definitely a balance. So
Strength to have to be able to protect it, but at the same time, you have to nurture it. Well, you get that dichotomy, bringing everything together and putting in the balance.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about this. Say you have a horse, and you're either going to dominate the horse as a predator to get it to do what you want it to do, or on the luminous side, do I communicate with the horse in a loving, caring way and have a relationship with it that it chooses to carry me on its back, and it chooses to learn, things, and then I can train it because it's something different. But in any kind of training, you've got, these moments that can be really feminine or they can be very masculine. If the horse decides that it's had enough of your crud and kicks you in the leg, well, then you just got to see the masculine aspect. If you see the horse
there's
loves
just
you.
A little side to it, and you lift up the horse and then it accidentally headbutts you, and then you end up bleeding all over in the middle of the ring.
Well, some people would say that, maybe you needed that snap in your noggin, for your higher consciousness.
What is the symbolic meaning behind the nose, and why is it swelling?
Yeah, and you as an artist need to be like, yeah, and I just shot it out of my nose onto the wall, and I saw this really great pattern. No, I'm just kidding.
Kind of. I've got the tissue with the blood plot, the blood stains in it, shoved into my pocket. And there's been a number of times within my work where, especially when it comes to paper or either things that I've bled on or hair or things that have been detached from me in some sort of way, they always tend to find a way either into my work or into the ceremony going into the work. Always. I'm not exactly sure why, but it just feels right, or it feels natural. And I think, especially in my creative process, when I open up to the voices or when I open up to the guidance of, well, this needs to go here, or especially, you had mentioned this earlier too, in finding things, right? There's certain things that I'll stumble upon, and it's just keep this, you need to have this, you need to put this somewhere, and then it sits somewhere for sometimes a really long time, and then all of a sudden, when it comes to the art or when it comes to the ceremonial aspect of putting the pieces together, it has a very distinct purpose. Just for whatever metaphor that it plays into, or if it's representing a certain archetype or the color or just the energy that it has. But I think that it retains an essence of that intention that goes into it. So I always think about that, anytime I stub my toe or anytime I trip over something, what is the greater spiritual or the energetic thing that is going on in my life that is creating this? And oftentimes I think it's just because I'm not in present time. I'm either thinking of something that happened before or something that will happen, or I kind of find myself, I wonder if you can kind of help me with this, or maybe this is something we can speak about in a future show, since we're nearing the end of this one. Because when you're dealing with shamanism and you're in these different dimensions or on these different levels of consciousness kind of all at the same time, I don't really know what my question here is, other than to like, how does one balance or kind of synthesize all of those different things? Or I feel like just coming into the understanding that that's
Sometimes
what's so
there's
wrong.
not. I remember a long time ago, I got Lujan Matus to come on my show. I was like one of the first people to interview him. He usually wouldn't be interviewed, and he's just amazing. But I remember in one of the shows I asked him, so how do you control it ultimately? I mean, once you get to that, sweet spot in shamanism, and he started laughing, and then he just made me laugh. And he's like, you have no control. You're never going to have control. You don't have control. You can't control it. You just can't control this reality. So mostly it comes back to just you letting go of whatever agenda or need or whatever else that, codependency that you have to want to control it. And then all you do is, bring the focus back to yourself and just work on you.
Get out of the ego, drop the ego and go with the flow and trust.
Yeah, not so much trust. I think more discernment would be good. But anyway, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next Saturday. Have a great week.
It's the end already.
We're in commercial.
Aww.
I know.
Well, I guess until next week then, huh? We'll
Yeah.
find it out there in the ethers.
Yeah, you can always call me during the week, though. It's okay.
There you go.